Okay, so we are going to continue now with Chapter 3, actually. And as you know from the course calendar, essentially, we're kind of bouncing around a bit. We're actually covering 3.1 and 3.2 here in these series of videos coming up before we get to 1.5. And when we get to the 1.5 material, I'll try and make clear why that is, and I think it will be helpful for us. At any rate, in Chapter 3 here, we are learning about categorical logic, which is really the first system of logic that we'll be looking at in the class, to be followed later on with propositional and then predicate logic at the end. So as our introduction here to categorical logic, we'll be talking about categorical propositions specifically. And we're talking about standard form categorical propositions. So categorical propositions come in a variety of shapes and forms. However, only 4 of them have been deemed to be standard form, to have a particular format, we could say, that we can work with easily when it comes to symbolic logic. So, in general, though, all categorical propositions relate to classes, that is, types of things, right? So any categorical proposition is relating one thing to another. So all cats are mammals and so forth, right? Okay. So there are 4 standard form categorical propositions: all SRP, no SRP, some SRP, and some S are not P, right? So there are these 4 standard form categorical propositions, and I'll just quickly illustrate those here. I'll move this slide out of the way and then write some examples quickly on the board. So one standard form categorical proposition could be all cats are mammals. Of course, then have no cats are mammals, just as another example. Of course, they don't always have to be true. Now, in these 2 cases, of course, we have very short types of things. Like cats, one word describes them, and then mammals describes that. But they might be more involved. Some, I don't know, some senators are successful pianists. Or some senators are not. Successful pianists. Okay, so we've got these 4 standard form categorical propositions, and you can see that on the previous slide, which I'll bring back in a minute, you have the S here, sort of where the cats is, and then P where the mammals is, and so forth, right? But there are just the 4. All are, no are, some are, and some are not, right? Will be the key things about those. Okay, so we'll come back to these examples here in just a second. All right. So as we just saw, right, S and P would be placeholders for the 2 types of things that any of these standard form categorical propositions are talking about. Now, I want to emphasize, there is no standard form categorical proposition known as all S are not P. That's not to say that people don't express themselves using a sentence like that very often. However, this is not considered in standard form. And the reason for that is because a statement like this is ambiguous, okay? And logicians don't like perhaps several different things. One of the things that logicians, people who do logic for a living, they don't like is ambiguity. They don't like imprecision. This, unfortunately, is an example of an imprecise sentence. Now, I'm going to hope to illustrate that here with this sentence here that you see on the screen, which I'm, for the moment, avoiding saying out loud. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to say it out loud using exactly the same words twice. I'm going to say it out loud twice. But in a certain sense, the way I will speak it out loud will vary from one to the other. And you will, I hope, see that depending on how I read these words out loud, that can lead to different meanings being taken from that sentence, which again would be an indicator that it is ambiguous. So here are a couple attempts. I might tell you, all horses are not animals native to Europe. On the other hand, I might say, all horses are not animals native to Europe. Now, I promise you, I said exactly the same words in each case. However, when I say all horses are not animals native to Europe, it seems very definitive, I would think you would say. It's like a no kind of thing. None of them are. On the other hand, if I say all horses are not animals native to Europe, putting that different speech tone in there, it seems to suggest something more along the lines of some. Some are, some are not. Well, no and some have very different meanings, right? So the idea here, the hope, is that you can see that a statement like all are not is ambiguous, it's imprecise, it can lead to misleading interpretations, depending on how you might read it or how it might be spoken out loud. So, because of that, we want to avoid statements like all are not. A couple ways that you might hear that sentence depending on how it's read out loud. Here's the most important point, though, on this slide. I guarantee, I promise you, you will be tempted to write all are not of some kind of sentence like that. I guarantee you'll be tempted to write that at some point in this class. Unfortunately, that point comes, for most people, on the exam, on the first exam about this. And that is where you don't want to write all or not, because that will be a mistake. It is not a standard form, categorical proposition. So, I will encourage you at the top of your note sheet to put, don't write all or not, and then at the end of the first exam, it takes some time before you hand it in to scan your answers and look for the dreaded all or not. I will tell you, if you are tempted to write all or not, what you probably want to write instead, or meant to have written, would be the corresponding sentence that would use no, right? Because no SRP is a standard form categorical proposition. Now, just in case you're tempted to write no are not, avoid that as well. No are not is not a standard form proposition, but usually that's not much of a temptation. However, all S are not P, that kind of sentence is. Write the corresponding no statement instead, and you'll be fine. All right. So, 3.1 is basically, it's one of the drier sections, I would say. It's simply trying to get across, for the most part, some definitions, okay, that apply to standard form categorical propositions. And so we'll look at that here next. So first of all, we have a quantifier. The quantifier is the word all, no, or some, the very first word of the standard form categorical proposition. Following the quantifier, you have what is called the subject term. That's between the quantifier and the word are. And then you will have what is called the copula, and that's that word are, or in the case of the some quantifier, sometimes you might have some are not. And so in that case, are not would be the copula. And then finally, we have the predicate term, which in a standard form categorical proposition would be everything after the copula. Right? So every standard form categorical proposition has these four elements, and I'll just let you know that you're going to be tasked with identifying them with some standard form categorical propositions when we get to the first exam. But just to illustrate how you can do that here, I'm going to go ahead and move this slide out of the way. Right. And we can go back to our examples here, at least the first one. We don't need to do this in every case. But we have all cats are mammals, right? And so we would say then that this is the quantifier, right? You could even, on the exam, when I give you a standard form categorical proposition and ask you to identify these components, something like that would be fine. So cats would be the subject term then. Oh, I guess you can't see that. Here we go. Copula would be are. Excuse me. And mammals would be the predicate term, right? So we can break this down along those lines. Maybe I'll just do one more quickly here just to illustrate this, but some senators are not successful pianists, right? So here we have quantifier some. Senators would be the subject term. Now, if you ever have trouble with this, it might be because you get a statement like this and forget that the copula is in fact are not. Right, so that's the copula. And then here we have a longer predicate term, successful pianists, right? But you can break down these different components along these lines here, and you'll be asked to do that. But hopefully it's fairly straightforward.